to Parshat Mishpatim, the last chapter, chapter 24. Many of you who've been studying together with us understand that we brought this famous rule of Chazal, Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar B'Torah. There's no chronological order in the Torah. But if that's the case, that there is no chronological order, each and every time we use this rule, there must be some sort of explanation that satisfies our intellectual curiosity that there is no order. Regarding chapter 24 is what I want to discuss in this shur, which is not going to be a long shur. And that is the following. We see that in the beginning, Moshe is summoned up to the mountain. V'al Moshe amar alei el Hashem, ata v'aron adav avihu, etc., etc. Rashi, according to the opinion of Gemara Masechet Shabbat, says we're still talking about pre-Ten Commandments. In other words, chapter 24 is still going back to the last section, Yitro, to the rising or the alighting of the mountain by Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how Rashi explains the entire section. What I want to share with you is the approach of Ramban, Nachmanides, as well as several other great Rishonim that explain differently. This chapter is happening the day after the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances, the 10 commandments. As you well know, in the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, the calendar date for the 10 commandments was the 6th of the month of Sivan. 6th of the month of Sivan. What is the purpose of this chapter? Where we see that the entire nation, as you see in verses 3 and 4, the entire nation is congregated. And the entire nation is responding to the words of Moshe. And Moshe is in fact writing the words of God, which could mean a certain book, as we're talking about in verse 7. Vaikach Sefer habrit. It's not clear what is this book of the covenant that he's reading be'oznei ha'am, to the ears of the nation, in verse 7. And notice the response. Yes, you see the response of the people. Vayomru, they say, quote, Kol asher diber Hashem, whatever God said, na'aseh ve'nishma. Question: is this conference, is this assembly, the same one that we saw in the book of Yitro, where the people are getting ready for the words of God in the 10 Commandments? That's what Rashi says, it's the same one. What I want to share with you, though, is what Ramban is teaching, and that is going according to the understanding that the Torah here is, I repeat, is in chronological order. And this event that's happening here in Shmot Kaf Daled is the event happening the day after the 10 Commandments. The day after the 10 Commandments, namely on the 7th. And if that's the case, what is the Sefer habrit? What is the book of the covenant that Moshe Aleph is reading? Bet, the nation is responding overwhelmingly with enthusiasm. Na'aseh v'nishma, will do even before we hear, and then we'll hear. Third, what is the taking of the blood? That a mizbeach here is built. Half of the supply of the blood is what? In a kli, in verse 6, called aganot. And the other half is thrown on the mizbeach. What does that have to do with anything? There are many other questions that can be raised, but I want to share the understanding of what the Ramban says. My dear friends, a brit, a contract, a divine contract, is being made. The two sides of the agreement obviously are Hashem and the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu is the agent, the go-between. He is providing the contractual situation in order that you and I can sign on the dotted line. Now, let's take just an example of common terms that you can better understand. Also, I think I heard this from Rav Yoel Ben Nun, one of the great Tanakh teachers in our generation, from a family of great Tanakh teachers. Let's just say that you go visit your attorney, okay? And your attorney, pre the closing of the deal, is explaining to you all the pages of the assumed contract. All the details, everything is there and there and there and explained. And now you, the client, you've been explained all the matters. You now make a final appointment 2-3 weeks from now, whatever, for the closing of the deal. And you then go to the attorney weeks later. What is not going to happen on the final closing? He's not going to review for hours and hours all the fine details. Rather, he's going to take what we call in Hebrew a taktsir. A taktsir is an abbreviated edition of the agreement, which basically summarizes, but in short, what you're coming to agree upon. There's no time right now on the 7th, the day after the 10 Commandments, to go through all of the details of the oral Torah. Rather, what's happening right now for Bnei Yisrael to say, even excitingly, even enthusiastically, Naaseh v'nishma, it's like the closing agreement on a abbreviated contract. In the abbreviated contract, we don't read all of the details. Rather, we read what's called in Hebrew a taktsir, from the word katsar, short. Okay? Just like Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, is a short and abbreviated edition of what? Ol Malchut Shamayim, which we discussed in the previous shur, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, meaning belief in God. That is a shortened version of it. So too here, Moshe Rabbeinu maybe takes a shortened edition of the Torah of 613 mitzvot. Maybe it could be exactly, I don't know, that's not clear. Is he writing down the 10 Commandments? Is he writing down some other key mitzvot? But all of what he's writing down to present to the nation is an abbreviated edition that's called in the language of the Torah, Sefer habrit. Sefer habrit is a shortened edition of the Torah. So, in order for us to hear, agree, and give us our agreement. Some of you are well aware, Rashi brought in last week's Parsha, in this Parsha rather, that from the 10 Commandments, Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon is able to construe all of the 613 mitzvot. So what we have happening here is the taking of Sefer habrit and providing a shortened contractual agreement. Didn't the nation say pre-10 Commandments, Naaseh will do it? The answer is, as some of our great commentators explain, when you hear the greatness of who you are, you're a skula, a treasured nation of all the nations. Number 2, I'm making you a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of what? Priest. Okay? V'goy kadosh. Wow. Things sound so jolly, so lovely, so noble, so uplifted. Who wouldn't want to agree to whatever we're going to be given? I'm sorry. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The laws of thievery, the laws of usury, the laws of murder, the laws of lending money, the laws of social relationships, the laws of caring for the ger, the laws of the 4 torts and damages, of the 4 damages that we learned last week, the primary damages. Wow. When the Torah gets down to the nitty-gritty, when the Torah gets down to all the fine details, are you ready then? Or are you just ready for a general, unclear Torah that you hear is so great? No. The greatness of the Torah is in all its particulars. The greatness of the Torah is in all its details. Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Choshen Mishpat. Wow, what a difficult situation. Are you willing now to accept? If so, let's now enter the Brit. I'm reading. Number 1, acceptance? Yes. Number 2, to enter into the Brit, like one of the last Rashis in the entire Parsha, no, not one of the last, we need 3 things, as the Gemara explains, Chazal, in order to enter into the Brit. Number 1, Brit Milah. Number 2, Tevilah, immersion in a mikveh. And number 3, the sprinkling of blood of the korbanot, because just sprinkling blood without immersion in the mikveh is also not enough. Now, when did the Jewish people undergo Brit Milah? Do you remember?
When Abraham gave himself.
Jewish people, the nation of Israel that's entering into this contract, who remembers when they entered into a Brit Milah. It's not written in the Torah. It's a midrash that we brought in our learnings.
I think they do it right before they come to Eretz Yisrael.
No, they did it
Before
the exodus of Egypt.
Leaving Mitzrayim?
Before leaving Mitzrayim, the midrash says, we entered into a Brit Milah. The blood of the Brit Milah was mixed together with the blood of what? The Korban Pesach, and then it was smeared on the 2 mezuzot, and on top of the mashkof, the lentil on top, 2 mezuzot, 1 mashkof, and that's how we use the blood of the Brit Milah. So, 50 days ago, approximately, Am Yisrael entered into part 1 of the Brit of God, inclusive of the Torah. We did Brit Milah. Part 2. There's a mikveh there, according to Chazal. It's a Gemara in Masechet Kritut, page 9, side 1, that they entered into a mikveh here at Mount Sinai. Where? I don't know. I can't explain to you everything. Number 3, here is the spilling of the blood after the taking of sacrifices that you see in verse 5. Vaya'alu olot. The leader. Who are the leaders? Who are the youngsters of the Jewish people? Who are the people doing the sacrifice? We don't have Kohanim yet, do we? Or do we? Who are the Kohanim? Verse 5. Excellent. Vayishlach et na'arei b'nei Yisrael, the Bechor. Whoever's firstborn of the opening of the mother's womb has Kedusha, has special holiness. Whatever is first is unique, is holy. So here we have the Bechorim in verse 5, doing the sacrifices, olot, vayizbechu zvachim shlemim, in addition, peace offerings, and blood is being taken, half in a kli, and half that's not on a kli. Half is being sprinkled on the Mizbeach, and half in the kli is going to be sprinkled on the Jewish people. The sprinkling of blood towards the forehead, I assume, in the area. Don't worry about your new suit, it's not going to be stained. And so we have now, in summary, 3 great actions, in addition to the reading out of the condensed agreement. Sefer, habrit. We have Brit Milah, we have Tevilah, immersion in the mikvah, and number 3, we have a sprinkling of blood. All of this with the reading of the condensed Torah, and the Jewish people saying, okay, we're ready. Naaseh v'nishma, we now have a covenant of acceptance of the Torah by the Jewish people the day after Sinai, and in fact, it even accepts that all people now are Jewish, part of the Jewish people, which is now finalized. And from here at Sinai, after we're all the Jewish people doing like a conversion here under the mount, by the mountain here, now from now on, the lineage of the Jewish people will not be until now Hebrews according to the father, rather the Jews according to the mother. That's what I wanted to share with you regarding this matter. Any questions?
Yeah. When did they do the mikvah?
Here, apparently on the 7th day, the day after the giving of the 10 Commandments. That's according to Chazal, all in the oral Torah. We don't see reference to it in the Chumash whatsoever.
Why didn't they do it before receiving the 10 Commandments, so they would be pure?
We have not yet accepted Torah. Now we're accepting the Torah. We're about to hear.
Before you accept something pure, before you accept the Torah, you would want to be pure.
Yeah, both. So that's a good question. But here, Aleph, after we're being Jews now, number 1. Number 2, we're hearing what's in the Torah. It's not enough to hear the holy, noble 10 Commandments and you remain on this lofty high. You've got to put your back down on the ground, your feet on the ground. You're ready to do tefillin, mitzvah, mezuzah, the 4 primary damages, and so on and so forth. Okay? Gentlemen, we'll stop here. Have a good day. Shalom, be well.
One second.